One location, 3 temples, and many breasts. You guessed it, our 4th wonder of the ancient world is the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Let's get into it. The Temple of Artemis, also known as the Temple of Diana because the Romans liked to take the Greek gods and just change their names for their own religion, and also known as the Artemision, which sounds like the coolest transformer of the bunch, was located in Ephesus near the modern town of Selcuk in present-day Turkiye. Archaeological evidence shows that there were not 1, not 2, but 3 different temples built on this site as early as the Bronze Age, around the 8th century BCE, with the final one being destroyed for good in 401 CE. So we've got over 1,000 years of worship going on at this one place. That's dedication. Now, the final and largest and greatest iteration of the Temple of Artemis is the one that's included on the 7 Ancient Wonders list, and to one of our ancient writers, it seems to have been their favorite. Antipater of Sidon wrote that he has set eyes upon all the previous wonders, but, quote, "When I saw the house of Artemis that mounted to the clouds, those other marvels lost their brilliancy, and I said, Lo, apart from Olympus, the sun never looked on aught so grand." I think he liked it, you guys. But this wouldn't be a Raven video if we just talked about the final one. No siree. We gotta go through all the archaeological phases to get the entire story of the site. It's a wonder of the ancient world, after all. We gotta treat it right. The sacred site at Ephesus is ancient. More ancient than the Greeks who immigrated to Asia Minor, and Callimachus, in his work Hymn to Artemis, gave credit to the Amazons for the founding of the sacred area because he thought their religion centered around an image of Artemis. But other writers, like Pausanias, thinks the sanctity of the site was from even earlier. To find out the truth, we turn to the dirt. Before World War I, the site was excavated by David George Hogarth, who identified 3 building phases. And re-excavations in the 1980s confirmed that the site was occupied in the Bronze Age around the 8th century BCE with a peripteral temple with a clay floor. A peripteral temple is a type of temple that's surrounded by a portico with columns and a colonnade on all 4 sides. It also means that the perimeter is made up of columns. That's just the easiest way to sort of visualize what this temple would have looked like. This style of temple here at Ephesus is the earliest example we have on the coast of Asia Minor, and might even be the earliest Greek temple that is surrounded by columns anywhere in the Greek world. Wild. This temple was destroyed by a flood in the 7th century BCE. When this layer was excavated, archaeologists found the remains of a carved ivory plaque of a griffin and one of the Tree of Life, as well as some teardrop-shaped amber beads, or drops or things that were drilled, so they would have kind of been hung. These drops were probably worn by a wooden effigy or image of the goddess being worshipped there. Overall, the flooding covered the site with about 2 meters of silt, but still people were determined to rebuild, which means this area was super important to those who worshipped there. The second temple was built with the help of the Lydian king Croesus, who founded Lydia's empire around 550 BCE. The building was designed by a Cretan architect named Chersiphron and his son Metagenes, and it took 10 years to complete. It was apparently the first Greek temple built of marble, and it measured 115 meters long and 46 meters wide, with 13-meter tall columns in rows of 2 surrounding it. According to Pliny the Elder, 36 columns were decorated with relief carvings, and a new cult statue was erected. Fragments of these reliefs show that they were used as inspiration for the 3rd and final temple, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The foundation deposit for this temple was found to have over 1,000 items inside of it, including what might have been the earliest coins made from electrum, which is a alloy metal made from silver and gold. Artemis was popular, man. Look at all this nice stuff she was getting. Gosh. I wish I was her. The temple itself was quite the place to be back in the day. It was visited by merchants, travelers, and even kings so they could pay homage to the goddess. The temple was also famous for offering sanctuary to people who were fleeing persecution or punishment. The Amazons were most famously supposed to have claimed asylum there twice, first from the god Dionysus, and then again from Hercules, or Heracles because we're talking Greek myths here. Alas, the temple was no match for the audacity of a man. Typical, am I right? In 356 BCE, the temple was destroyed by a fire caused by a man named Herostratus. He apparently set fire to the wooden roof beams because he wanted to become literally famous at any cost. What a guy. Resorting to pure destruction instead of just hard work or being a good person to get attention. Joke's on him though, because the Ephesians sentenced him to death and apparently also banned anyone from ever mentioning his name. Ah, what sweet justice. According to Plutarch, Artemis was too preoccupied that day to save her temple because she was taking care of the birth of Alexander the Great, which is around the 20th or 21st of July, 365 AD. I guess we all have our priorities. Now, this story of Herostratus has been called into question by some scholars because he would have needed access to the wooden roof beams, and the temple would have had these temple guards and custodians. Some suspect that the fire might have even been an inside job set by the temple administrators because the foundations were sinking and, they couldn't move the temple because the site itself was what was sacred and not the building. Sounds like they were in it for the insurance money, if you ask me. There is some evidence of conservation throughout all of the temple's rebuildings because of this continuous flooding, so it is possible that Herostratus was used as a scapegoat for the priests who destroyed the temple. A lot of the evidence for that comes from the fact that he apparently only admitted that he set the fire for fame when he was tortured. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like someone doing something to be famous. Oh man, now I feel bad for him. But the show must go on, and the temple was rebuilt a second time with about 2.4 meters of silt separating these layers. Again, with this temple, it's all location, location, location. Alexander the Great offered to pay for the temple to be rebuilt. I wonder if he heard of a legend and, felt guilty about the whole being born while it was on fire thing. But the Ephesians declined and were trying to be all, flirty by saying, oh, it wouldn't be proper for one god to build a temple to another. Yeah, okay, Ephesus, way to be the teacher's pet over here. Anyways, they started rebuilding it after Alexander's death, starting in 323 BCE. This third temple was the largest one yet, measuring 137 meters long, 69 meters wide, and 18 meters high, with over 127 columns. This temple was similar in design to the second temple, as we can see from the decorated column drums, and some of the original sculptures from the second one were included, like the carvings of the Amazons done by a sculptor named Scopas. The columns were gilded with gold and silver, and artwork on the columns were created by famous Greek sculptors. This was the final form of the temple and one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But now I'm starting to wonder if it was the temple itself or just the sanctity of the location that led to the wonder and its inclusion on the list. It's something to think about anyways, as we often give a lot of meaning to places even if they don't have wildly impressive monuments. And Ephesus seems to have both. This third temple stood for 600 years, and we even have it showing up in early Christian writings. In the New Testament, the first Christian missionary showed up in Ephesus, and everyone there became super afraid and defensive of the temple's dishonor. But then in the 2nd century CE, the Acts of John tells the story of how when the Apostle John prayed publicly in the temple to exorcise its demons, the altar of Artemis split into many pieces and half of the temple fell down. Now this made it super easy to convert the Ephesians. I think even I might be convinced after that, to be honest. This probably didn't happen though, or maybe not to the whole extent, because we have a Roman edict dating from 612 CE that acknowledged the importance of the Temple of Artemis and the annual Festival of Artemis. They even extended the festival from a few days to an entire month. In 268 CE, the Goths raided Ephesus and set fire to the temple. Again, there may have been some reconstruction, but we don't know how much damage was caused. The temple might have been abandoned and left crumbling until its official closure when all the pagan religions were banned in the late Roman Empire, but the temple could also have been closed as early as 407 CE, and once Ephesus became a Christian city, the name of Artemis was forgotten for centuries. Cyril of Alexandria credits the Archbishop of Constantinople, John Chrysostom, with the ultimate destruction of the temple, even calling him the destroyer of the demons and the overthrower of the Temple of Diana. A legend from medieval times says that some of the columns in the Hagia Sophia were taken from the Temple of Artemis, but we don't have any proof of this. By the 14th century, the site of the temple was completely overgrown and lost to history. The remains of the temple lay under the ground until it was rediscovered in 1869 during an expedition sponsored by the British Museum and led by John Turtle Wood. This work, along with the excavations carried out by David George Hogarth I mentioned earlier, brought up sculpture fragments that were brought back and assembled in the British Museum. Today, the site of where the temple stood is marked by a single column made from contextless fragments that were discovered in the area. Now, I should mention that the second and third temples of Artemis at Ephesus weren't dedicated to the typical classical Greek goddess Artemis, but rather to Ephesian Artemis. We know the first and earliest one definitely housed a sort of great goddess, but we don't know any of those specifics, so we won't really be talking about that here. In traditional Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo and the virgin goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, and the moon. Greek Artemis looks like this, while Ephesian Artemis looks like this. Very different. At Ephesus, Artemis's features are more similar to Near Eastern or Egyptian deities. Her body and legs are together and enclosed almost like a mummy or Ptah or Osiris, but her feet come out of the bottom. And on coins that were minted at Ephesus, she wears a mural crown, which is a crown that represents the city walls. This is associated with the Anatolian mother goddess and protector of cities, Cybele. You might notice something else interesting about this statue. All of the oval objects that cover the upper part of her body. Very suggestive, no? The traditional interpretation for these nodules is that they're just a bunch of breasts to symbolize her fertility. But if we look at some versions of her statue, Artemis's skin is painted black, which is likely to make it similar to aged wood of the original cult object, which was traditionally made of dark wood, and all of her clothes and regalia, including the mysterious mammaries, were left unpainted or decorated in a different color. It's been suggested that instead of breasts, these oval objects were decorations that could have been ceremonially hung on the original wood statue and were possibly eggs or the scrotal sacs of sacrificial bulls. Delicious. These very organic and temporary hangings were probably replaced with more permanent carvings in later copies of the cult image. These are very similar to the amber gourd-shaped drops that were drilled for hanging and found in the remains of the first temple. Look at these cool connections we've got here. Oof, it's so interesting to be able to see the evolution of this goddess's cult. In some records, her priests were eunuchs, which again is a similarity with Cybele, and Ephesian Artemis probably looked so different to the Greek one because of the ancient Greek habit to sort of assimilate all foreign gods under one of theirs that was similar enough. So for them, the closest this, quote, Lady of Ephesus, as she was also called, was Artemis, even though it's not really a perfect fit, as her associations with Cybele also make her similar to Demeter. There was also a tradition in ancient Rome that identified her with the Egyptian goddess Isis, so she really is a mix of all these great and powerful mother goddesses that were out there. A powerful temple for a powerful goddess. All of the other 7 ancient wonders were for men or male gods, so we love to see some representation on this list, especially when, according to some, it seems like it was the best one to visit. There's a joke in there somewhere about lots of breasts and it being the most spectacular, but I don't want YouTube to flag me, so you'll just have to use your imaginations there. If you haven't seen the other videos on the ancient wonders of the world, check out this playlist right here. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on all the other videos that are coming out in this series. And if you like the channel, you want to help support it, you get a lot of value from it, head on over to Patreon and become a patron. You get to help me choose what videos I get to put out next. You get to see all my videos early, and you might get your name on the screen right here. Stay dirty, my friends.